All right, welcome back, Mush Love from the Mush Room. We got a awesome guest today. He's got a big podcast, so maybe we'll have to go on his podcast one day. But thank you for coming on, Derek Loudermilk. I think we got connected originally, being authors on the same book. Then we've just crossed paths a few times over the last 5 to 10 years, and then somehow realized that we were both interested in psychedelics for their healing powers, for their exploration and all of that. And we've kind of reconnected recently. So definitely excited to have you on today. Excited to kind of talk in a new realm, not just about business and self growth, although those definitely overlap a little bit. But want to hear, I guess, a little bit. When was the first time you did psychedelics? Did you know what you were getting into? And were you doing it for fun or for recreation? To begin, we could start off with that.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for having me. Good to be here with you. And ayahuasca ceremony in Bali 7 years ago
Oh,
was my
wow.
first experience. And I have no idea why I wanted to do it. It was kind of like just I'm an adventurer by heart, and so it was really just seeking new experiences, but somehow I knew that there was something there for me.
Hmm.
And this was a multi-day set of ceremonies. And the first two nights were just like blissful, life affirming, like the magical, like, oh my gosh, just seeing.
And you had never done any psychedelic before this. This was your first
Never.
experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's intense.
First experience. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. It was just like so full of energy and power. And then on the third, so I was there with my girlfriend at the time, and on the first night, I was like, oh my gosh, uh, I'm in love with you, and I think that I want to have children with you. And she was like, well, guess what? I'm pregnant.
No way.
Yeah.
What?
And it was like, oh, instant.
Is there something that made you come to that realization that you love her and that you wanted kids, like a vision or whatever, or you just felt like overwhelming love?
Yeah, it was really clear within the ceremony that we were like a perfect complementary, masculine, feminine, like external, internal. There's so many ways that we're complementary to each
Hmm.
other, opposites, or even astrologically. Like someone later looked at our chart and they're like, oh, this person, my wife's name is Heidi. She's going to bring you all the lessons you need in your lifetime, and you're going to bring her all the lessons that she
Wow.
needs. And it's like, wow, okay. So there was some awareness of that within the ceremony. I was like, oh, I found you. Um, and we'd already been dating, but I was actually kind of like casually dating other people at the same time, and
Hmm.
I wasn't fully aware that she was my person. But the ceremony really showed me that. and
That's wild.
and then once I realized I was going to be a dad, the third night, the last night of the ceremony, got really serious, and it was like, oh shit, you have responsibility. And so I had to basically clean up all these parts of my life that I was embarrassed about, or I had screwed up, or was ashamed of, or whatever. So it was like a very intense, like lots of years of work all in a few hours. And it was
Hmm.
really terribly excruciating. Worst experience of my life for sure. Um, but the I'd say, and like the peak moment of that was like everyone else was finished with their experience, kind of had gone to bed, and I was still deep in the middle of it, sweating and sort of shaking, and uh continuing to vomit. And I was like all alone, and I was like, please, I need some help.
Hmm.
And because I had been doing this for hours, and I felt, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna go crazy. I don't know if I'm gonna die. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And so I just kind of asked for help, and the shaman woke up, had already gone to bed, woke up, came out, and kind of like drew this dark mass out of my chest, out of my heart space,
Hmm.
and was like, oh, you're gonna need to fill that heart space with love for your kids. So I need to remove this like gunk out of here for you. And after that, it was still painful, but it was like that was the turning point of the whole process.
That's wild. So, how many people were there for the ceremony?
12, I think, something like
12.
that.
I
Yeah.
think it reminds me, I have a guy I met maybe 2 years ago who was telling me about his ayahuasca ceremony, I think in like Costa Rica, and his was maybe like 40 to 50 people, definitely a larger group than I had ever heard. And I believe there was like 6 couples that were there that
Mm.
divorced or like broke up during the session, and like
Hmm.
and 3 couples who became couples and like fell in love. And it was just wild.
Whoa.
I guess like it sucks to have to be divorced, I guess, but if you're called and it doesn't seem like you're in the right path, like it's probably for the best. So it's wild that it can really do that for so many people. That's pretty nuts. Did anyone else have any like wild experience like that, do you know of, where they like just like instantly changed their life trajectory a bit?
Well, the other person I remember, someone next to me, was like having a Kundalini awakening and was just like in a continual orgasm all night.
What?
And it was at times distracting, but
Yeah.
also pretty dramatic.
Yeah, that's I think I'd want to see that. That sounds wild. So you do this, you do psychedelics for the first time 7 years ago. You start off with probably like as extreme a psychedelic as you could probably do. After that, did you realize like, hey, psychedelics have a place in my life? Did you realize like I want to explore this, or how did you kind of, or did you go into, let's say, LSD or mushrooms or ketamine, or are you still not there yet?
Yeah, and then mushrooms. And
Mm,
so I was living in Bali. They're everywhere. The local people just go and get them after it rains from the
right.
cow dung, and technically they're not legal, but the local people all just know how to find them. And that's pretty much always been a very positive, just sort of joyful experience. But I'm always, when I go in that space, I always get some information. It's like digging down into the library of consciousness to pull out some useful information. And a lot of times it's symbolic or mythological type of information. It
Hmm.
helps me in my life path, but it's not always explicit exactly what it is. It's a lot of interpretation.
Definitely. How do you go about interpreting it? Do you have someone that you kind of relay your messages with? Do you have like a kind of shaman, I guess you would say, or like maybe your wife you talk it over with to try and discover what they're telling you? Or how do you go about that?
She's pretty good about that. I have other friends. I think there's a lot of, so I write down my dreams every day, so I pay close attention to my dream time, and that also helps with interpretation of understanding other types of awareness,
Hmm.
other states of consciousness. Just but yeah, really also just like sitting with something. So the most recent sort of high dose journey that I did, I was basically saw myself as Captain America, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
That's
Like
awesome.
I have no connection to Captain America. He's like my least favorite Avenger, and I was
Yeah.
like, well, okay, what's up with this? And the lesson for me there was like Captain America is a real, in that universe. He's like a normal dude. He's a man. He has friends, but he's also a symbol for
Hmm.
the nation, for people. Some people, they put their hopes and dreams upon him as a symbol in a way, but he's also a man. And I'm a semi well-known public figure at this point. There's people can see me on YouTube or whatever. And
Hmm.
so whatever they have in themselves that they're needing or seeing from my work, that means something totally different to them individually than it does for me to produce the work. And it was teaching me that awareness of like what it means to be both a person but also sort of a a symbol that people attach onto meaning in some way.
And that came to you in, I guess we didn't really define, do you microdose or do you macrodose? And like, did that come to you in the middle of a trip, or was that like kind of over a couple weeks? There's like little hints and messages that come to you that you kind of put together.
Yeah, this was like a macro dose journey where I set aside a full day for the experience. And yeah, sort of several hours in, was basically sticking on the same awareness. And I was like, okay, this is significant.
I like it. Do you, what does a macro look like for you? Like, do you do what's recommended by like Terrence McKenna, 5 grams blindfolded in a dark room, or does it vary for you? Do you always do the same thing?
Yeah, starting with about 5 grams. I've done up to 8, but typically 5 is fine for me. And yeah, blindfolded a lot of times just to with the headphones on, like to really go inward. But being around with other people is also useful. So I kind of like sometimes like leave that space for a little bit and then come back to it. So like spend an hour in and then half an hour out and then an hour back in, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, I feel like maybe that's the intention, but knowing an hour of time when you're under the influence of that is hard. Like sometimes I'll put a blindfold on, I'll think it was an hour and it's been like 2 minutes. And you're like, what the heck? Like your whole time is so distorted. It's impressive how it can do that. I love it. So how often would you say you go about doing a macro these days then?
It's getting less and less. Probably 4 times a year.
Nice.
At this point. But I think what is available to people, and I've started noticing, is that I almost don't need the physical mushrooms anymore to access that awareness. It's like I've trained myself at this point where I can get pretty close to the same states, but without any physical input. And it's just kind of like you experience the frequency enough that you can dial into it of just your own intention.
Yeah, I think Ram Dass, when he was in one of his excursions in India, had a bunch of acid that he was taking in his meditations, and I don't think he told his teacher. And at one point, I think his teacher said something like, "I know what you're doing, and I just want you to know that it's not necessary. Like, you don't have to do that." And I think that was like the last time that Ram Dass supposedly took acid, because he realized, like you're saying, is that acid's just a tool to get you to a certain place. But once you've done it enough, you can figure out how to get to that place on your own. And it's not necessary to take it as much. So it sounds very similar. I agree, from my experience a bit. I definitely don't need mushrooms all the time, but it definitely helps me get into that place a little bit quicker. Which just sometimes, I don't know, it's you don't have the patience to just do it on your own. So 4 times a year, you say it's always or usually like by yourself. Do you ever? I believe, or maybe I'm a little mistaken, that you have like these retreats or like groups that you do that you lead on. Is that right?
I haven't done those adventure quest trips with psychedelics. Those are typically, spending a day out adventuring and then coming back the next day and doing sort of classroom work for leadership and entrepreneurs. And that's really using, physical challenges and sort of interpersonal work to work on leadership. But I've attended retreats that incorporate plant medicine in other work. Vocal transformation retreat that I went on, which is really using the voice and mantra and movement to shift the physical body or, get rid of trauma. So I was doing that, partly to be able to speak truth more clearly, to also to be able to sing and express myself on stage when I'm speaking, But it's really a great combination to do plant medicine with some other modality.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. What do you think then, like the future landscape of psychedelics would look like? Do you think that it's going to be mostly like these group type retreats? Do you think it might be a little bit more restrictive? And like, I think there's some talk, it was just decriminalized in Colorado yesterday, and there's people who are proponents of psychedelics, but we're against this initiative because they claim that it's going to be like $1,000 to do a therapy session, and it's going to be like behind closed doors in their controlled environments, and that might not really be conducive for everyone. What do you really? Where do you see the industry of psychedelics going in the next few years?
Well, one thing that I'm a little worried about is beginners trying to pass themselves off as experts and guiding people when they're not.
Yeah.
When they don't have enough, what the shaman that I work with, he calls personal power. And so in some occasions, right, if you can't bring yourself back from where you've gone, then you need someone with a lot of power to bring you back and put you back in your body. And I was pretty lucky, I think, because I was kind of playing around with this early on, and was able to fully reintegrate. But that time, that ayahuasca journey, like I definitely needed the shaman's help, right? I had to call for help. And so, yeah, I think we really need enough experienced people, which only comes over time, to be able to assist the people that are doing like the really deep work. And so there's some limitation, I believe, on how quickly this could grow or accelerate just based on skillful practitioners' experience. But the people that are stepping, doing it for the first time now, some of them will spend some years learning this and eventually become facilitators to help. I interviewed the founder of the Ayahuasca Foundation, Carlos Tanner. He's down in Peru, and 15 years ago they partnered with some Shipibo shamans, a pair of them, and started this foundation. And basically they've trained enough people at this point that there are now 200 ayahuasca retreat centers in this village. So
and
they
were like the first one, and there was only a few when they started it.
Back then, in the sort of early 2000s, you had to go and just find someone in their village. Pretty much. So there wasn't any like Westerner facing lodging or setups. So in the last 15 years, 200 sort of well-trained practitioners have built up the scene there. So that, let's say in 15 years from now in the US, it could be just starting to get more formalized like that.
Yeah, I that'd be interesting to see. So I feel like ayahuasca is definitely not at, like, no psychedelics are really too accepted right now, but it seems like mushrooms are trending, and there's more and more like moms and like Wall Street types, people who you wouldn't expect to be doing these things, to be are open to mushrooms. And I feel like, I don't know, I guess ayahuasca just seems a little bit more intense, but at the same time, it does seem to be more accepted in that realm too. So I'm curious if like ayahuasca will become as mainstream as maybe like mushrooms will, or LSD. I don't know. I guess that'll be interesting to see. So I guess a little bit of a just explanation for some people who might not know. Ayahuasca is a vine, but is then mixed with like DMT, and it basically makes for a DMT trip. But a DMT trip is usually going to be only like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Ayahuasca kind of extends that to like 6 hours. That's not like the best explanation, but would you agree that that's kind of what it is?
Yeah, the interesting thing I found out is that there's over 200 tribes that have their own way of brewing ayahuasca, and each one uses a different mixture of plants. And so each plant basically imbues its own pharmacology on on the mixture. And so it modulates how long the experience is. But let's say, each plant is a personality, an energy personality, which changes the experience. It's like they call it a dieta, meaning like you form a relationship with the plants you're consuming and they change your experience. And so there's such a richness in not just ayahuasca, but like in that culture, in the Amazonian, native culture, how you form relationships with plants in general. And I think that perhaps could be because Native Americans, North American native peoples had the same knowledge of pharmacology, right? They would find medicinal plants everywhere. And basically that's how modern Western pharma came. They basically took all the knowledge of the American Indians and turned it into pharmaceuticals.
And they made patents on it and synthesized it and patented it, but it's a lot of the same stuff. Exactly. It's crazy how they do that.
So I would kind of hope for knowledge of both mushroom medicine and plant medicine from the native people to become more prevalent, and that would just sort of include psychedelics, but also many non-psychedelics.
Yeah, I need to do more research, and I feel like it's hard to know who to trust, because like both sides definitely might be putting in some misinformation or kind of trying to have some bias for you. But I've been reading about I guess the Midwest, a bunch of Native Americans who are growing cacti that might have like mescaline or San Pedro. And basically those cacti can take like 10, 15 years to develop. But right now with psychedelics trending, a lot of Westerners are trying to buy that supply up a little too quickly. And I believe there's an initiative to like only allow Native Americans to grow it in the Midwest, so that they can kind of control it a little bit and it doesn't like get too big too quick. Have you heard of that at all? Or
I haven't heard of that specifically, but it's such a Western tendency to be like, well, let's just use this resource up. There's this amazing book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which I'm just finishing, which has been really meaningful to me. But when you're doing a harvest, they call it what do they call it? I can't remember the name of it, but you always skip the first plant you encounter if you're going out to pick cactus, because that may be the last one you encounter. So you greet the plant and you acknowledge it, and then you go and look for the next one. But then you always ask permission, like, do I have permission to harvest? And you kind of have to listen very closely, because it's not going to speak out loud, but it's like there's subtle signs that might tell you like, I better leave this one here. Or you might get a like, yeah, okay, it's totally cool. Because a lot of plants actually benefit from, just like deer populations benefit from some culling, right? Plant populations benefit from partial harvesting and can actually become more robust. So there's a way to do it that could actually expand and facilitate the process in a sustainable way that I don't think we are well practiced in.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I feel like there's a way to do it, and it doesn't seem like we usually do it the proper way, but hopefully they can figure it out. And I like that harvesting technique a lot, of like leaving the first one you see. I feel like with foraging mushrooms, a lot of times you hear like similar is like, when you're foraging mushrooms, you should never take all the mushrooms you see. You should always leave some there, so that next year when you come, they're going to still be there. If you take all of them, there's a chance that they're not going to come back. Seems pretty similar there. So getting towards the end of our time, I have a few more questions for you though. So psychedelics aren't legal and they're not really accepted by a lot of mainstream people, although there's more and more acceptance. How do you go about talking about it with people, and how do you promote it, or do you kind of like keep quiet until someone else mentions it, or like what's the line that you play there?
Yeah, typically people will bring up I'm thinking of microdosing, or I'm thinking of doing ayahuasca, and I'll say like, well, I have experience if you want
Yeah.
to hear. And usually then there's like an hour of questions.
Yep. Definitely. Definitely. So do you have a lot of people that you've noticed been coming up to you recently? And like, I guess, do you think psychedelics really might get legalized or decriminalized in most of the United States in the next few years? I think there was something a few months ago that said like the Biden administration is planning to allow psilocybin therapy within 2 years, which sounds like really soon. But it also doesn't sound too surprising to me. I kind of think psilocybin will be federally legal before cannabis will be. And part of me thinks it's like very necessary because there's a lot of people experiencing some very severe mental health issues right now. And it seems like the quickest, easiest, cheapest solution that can kind of heal as many people as possible, where there might be other solutions too, but a lot more extensive, a lot more difficult logistically, expensive, and all of that. So I hope it happens in 2 years, but do you think that's actually a possibility?
Well, there's an experience I had recently at the parents' party for my kids' school. So all the other
Mm,
kindergarten parents that we were having a get together, and multiple people brought it up without me bringing it up. And
mm,
for that to become like just casual dinner, party conversation among sort of parents, I think it's just a big sign,
definitely.
that so many people are thinking and talking about it right now. And I kind of just see that, okay, if I just did this 7 years ago, it was basically part of my role is I just was like maybe an early experiencer. A lot of people did it for decades before me, but
Right.
sort of early in the wave so that I can give some guidance or advice to other people as they experience it for the first time.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I would agree too. I don't know if it's because I'm involved in it, but I feel like I hear people mentioning psychedelics all the time now, like on the news, in like TV shows, people you wouldn't really expect. There's a big movement of like microdosing moms, which just like I think is good because you probably don't expect a mom to be microdosing, but they're doing it. And I don't know, I think it's all for the better. So I guess last like little thing to close up on, how do you see what are you working on, I guess, a little bit, and then yeah, tell me that first, a little bit what you're working on, because we've been talking all psychedelics. I want to hear just a little bit more about Derek, and then I'll go to our closing question.
Well, actually, there's one story that I want to share that I found really interesting. So, in general, I'm an experimenter. I've trained as a scientist, but I'm doing lots of personal experiments. And recently, I was taking like kind of a micro dose level, like a very low level, sort of less than 100 what was it, micrograms
Mm-hmm.
of before playing ultimate frisbee. And what I noticed was this rapid increase in sort of the skillful part of the sport, the precision. So you have to make these throws with the frisbee. It's kind of like American football. It has to be like right on a dime.
Mm.
Um, but it was allowing me, microdosing in this way was allowing me to sort of see all the players in motion simultaneously and understand the trajectories of each physical body, and also like the wind speed and the all the physical things which could improve the precision of playing. And so I had this month where I had like each game was my best game ever, and
Mm.
it was just really astounding. And I've also experienced it with weightlifting, where you can like perceive your body in a way that allows you to do movements that you normally wouldn't have access to.
I've heard someone else actually mention exactly that. That's pretty cool. They said like when they get in the zone in the gym and they're on a microdose that they see things that they normally wouldn't see. That's I hope I can find that. It was like I think it was a clip, but that's very interesting to hear
it's really
exactly the
cool.
same thing. Yeah, no, that is awesome. So I guess last question to close out. Someone who is interested in psychedelics or thinking of getting into them wants to improve their life or just wants to explore their life a little bit more, what's some advice you have them for them, or yeah, just advice you would have for them to get started.
Going back to what we're talking about with relationship building, think of mushrooms or ayahuasca or whatever you're going to be consuming as an individual, like another person that you're going to be building a relationship with, and you want to get to know them, you want to build trust with them. Pharmacologically, the way I see it is, it's the brain is sort of reducing this huge mass of awareness so that you can perceive it in your senses. And I see psychedelics as like opening that filter up a little bit. But that's just sort of the biochemistry of it. I think the deeper aspect of it is that there's a conscious entity that you're partnering with to do this work, and it would behoove you to have a good relationship with them. So think of it about approaching it as a relationship first, and sort of a biochemical experience second.
I love that, and I hope that you give me permission to probably use that in the future. I'm definitely gonna repeat that, of treating the medicine as a person. I don't know, the first thing that resonated with me when I heard that, I like it a lot, is like with a lot of people I hear from microdosing or using any like psychedelics maybe for intentionally, is they do it maybe like once or twice and then they like say like, oh, it didn't work, and they kind of give up on it. And right when you said like treat the medicine as a person, it kind of clicked in my head of like with a lot of people, you don't want to just like judge this person right after they meet them, especially maybe if you go on a date with someone that you were attracted to. You're not gonna just like after 10 minutes say I don't like them. You got to like treat them as a person, give them a chance, and really like learn from them and understand them. And that like connection I just made with the medicine too is like, it might not heal you right away when you first do it, but develop a relationship, maybe give something to the medicine, share knowledge about the medicine to other people and give into it. And a lot of time what you give in, you're going to get back as well. So I like that a lot. That resonated with me a lot, and I'm definitely going to use that. I'll give you credit whenever I use it. But that was great. So thank you so much for coming on, though. I learned a lot. I always do. I'm excited to rewatch this and learn even more. Maybe with a psychedelic filter on will help me get some more nuggets from it. But thank you so much. Definitely we'll have to talk again in the future, because there's a lot more questions that I didn't really get to. But thank you as always, Derek. Any last words before you say goodbye?
Well, Jeremy, thanks for having me. And I briefly mentioned my own podcast, YouTube. That's the Derek Loudermilk Show. You can find that anywhere you consume content. So check it out. We have related topics.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll definitely make sure to link that in our captions as well. So thank you as always. Much love from the mushroom. We'll see you guys next time.